Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're stepping into a space that feels incredibly present, really important right now, here in 2025.
Yeah, it feels like a pivotal moment for this kind of reflection.
It really does. We're going to take a truly deep dive into what it authentically feels like to be building something meaningful today.
Not just the highlights, right?
No, exactly. Not just talking about the big ideas, but really navigating that raw, complex territory. The space between a bold vision and the often quite challenging reality of making it happen in today's world.
That space, yeah, that's where it gets interesting, isn't it? Where the theory meets the messy reality.
Absolutely. So we're going to try and look past the usual headlines, the quick wins, the glossy founder stories.
And really get into the marrow of it, modern founding. Our mission today, I think, is to understand the texture of that experience.
Texture. I like it.
Yeah, like what shapes who even decides to build something now? What kinds of things are even possible to build? And maybe most importantly, why would anyone choose this path right now?
Exactly. And the perspective we're drawing on for this, it's quite specific. It's really insightful.
It's from someone in it, right?
Deeply immersed. Actively building multiple projects, reflecting on their own journey, their own observations of the landscape around them. So this isn't a formula,
Right.
not a checklist for success or a list of growth hacks.
No, definitely not. It feels much more like an exploration,
Yeah.
grappling with those fundamental forces, the push and pull.
Push and pull between what?
Between holding on to that core vision, that thing you really believe in, and then the very real need for external validation just to, survive.
Right. And the difference between building something that fits neatly into a box versus something something that creates its own box, its own category.
Yeah. And that's tough. It's a look at that messy, often unseen space. You mentioned buzzwords earlier. It's between the buzzwords and the actual bones of the work, the real effort required.
The sheer effort. So let's settle in and really start to unpack this journey.
Okay, let's do it.
So let's start right here with this moment. Why now? Why does 2025 feel like such a significant point to reflect on founding something? The source material we're digging into really grounds itself in the feeling of now.
Yeah, it emphasizes that this particular moment, it kind of highlights a specific kind of drive, doesn't it? The personal impulse isn't necessarily about building something predictable.
Like the source mentions, another ice cream machine, something easy to explain.
Exactly. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but the focus here is different. It's about the urge to build things that don't have that clear path.
Yeah.
No guaranteed market just waiting there.
Projects that demand a huge amount of belief up front, real conviction in their potential impact or maybe their cultural significance before any traditional metrics can, prove anything.
Right. It's about establishing presence first, building connection, fostering meaning, sometimes long before profitability is even a realistic conversation.
And that takes a different kind of courage, I think.
Definitely. It's this powerful internal thing, isn't it? This feeling of needing to bring this vision, this specific thing to life, even when the world seems to be asking for something, faster, simpler.
The source describes it as a balancing act, constantly, holding tight to that vision while navigating the very real need for validation.
From users, collaborators, funders, it's a constant negotiation.
And there's this sense, it's quite palpable in the writing, that founding itself has fundamentally changed. It's not just a little different from, say, 10 or 20 years ago.
No, the source uses that phrase. Radically, quietly, completely.
That really jumped out at me, too. Radically, quietly, completely.
It implies the foundations have shifted. Maybe in ways that aren't always loud or obvious, but they deeply affect the founder experience. That old story, the solo genius, the rocket ship, just doesn't quite fit anymore, does it?
Feels increasingly insufficient, yeah. And this perspective, it comes from someone living it, juggling multiple complex projects, aiming not just for financial return, but for resonance.
Resonance, cultural bridges, genuine connection. That's a different scorecard.
So, okay, let's move from that personal feeling, that internal drive, and look at the bigger picture the source paints, the landscape.
Right, the environment founders are actually operating in. And it starts with this big number, which sounds, on the surface, really positive.
Yeah, that stat about Germany. Over 500,000 people founding something in 2024 alone.
Sounds amazing, right? Like this huge wave of entrepreneurial energy.
It does. But then the source immediately throws in this crucial bit of nuance. It asks a really important question.
How many of those 500,000 were, truly building from inspiration, with real permission, real access to resources?
Versus how many were basically survival moves, because maybe traditional jobs weren't there or felt insecure.
That distinction changes everything, doesn't it? It's not just pure opportunity then. It's also about constraints, about reacting to pressure.
And that connects straight into the global capital scene.
Yeah, the source talks about this explosion of VC money worldwide, especially chasing the hot sectors, right? AI, climate tech, biotech, space, all the buzz areas.
You hear about these massive funding rounds all the time. It creates this impression that money's just sloshing around for any good idea.
But, and this is key, the source makes it clear that money doesn't flow equally, not even close.
Silicon Valley still hoarding a huge chunk.
A disproportionate share, yeah. And then you have places like China being very strategic, directing capital towards, national priorities.
Which leaves other regions, like Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that leave them?
The source puts Europe somewhere between hope and hesitation. That sounds about right. And specifically, Germany is mentioned as lagging behind the UK and France in attracting venture money.
So this uneven playing field, it creates vastly different conditions for founders depending on where they are.
Absolutely. It shapes not just if you can get funded, but what kinds of projects are seen as viable, as desirable by the local investors. The questions you get asked, the metrics you're judged on, it can be night and day.
And that external environment must have a massive psychological impact. The pressure.
Huge. The source really touches on that. This constant need, internal and external, for validation, for proving your concept works, often way too early before it's really baked.
While trying to stay true to that original vision, that balancing act again.
And the system, or at least how it's perceived here, seems to run at this relentless pace, demanding immediate, measurable results.
Capture attention instantly. Show progress now. Show ROI now.
Yeah, that line is brutal. If you can't deliver ROI in 90 seconds, you're out.
90 seconds. Wow. I mean, imagine trying to explain the depth of a cultural project or a complex systems change in a minute and a half.
It just highlights how badly suited the current filters can be for certain kinds of value, certain kinds of creation.
And beyond just the speed, the source mentions these systemic hurdles, particularly in Germany.
That phrase again. Apply. Wait. Justify. Justify again.
It sounds exhausting.
It's not just the paperwork, is it? It points to a culture that can feel maybe overly cautious, risk-averse, relying heavily on process, on repeated justification, which can just stifle things, slow everything down.
So it paints this picture of a funding and administrative culture that rewards predictability, velocity.
Yeah.
Maybe over fostering meaning or building trust or just giving things the time they need.
Yeah, allowing them the space to actually blossom and prove their worth over a longer time scale.
Which leads us perfectly into this core imbalance the source talks about.
Yeah.
The difference between building small projects and big projects.
Yeah, this is where it really gets into the structural challenges for founders whose ideas don't fit that hypergrowth mold.
If your project doesn't scream 10x return, the source says you're basically fighting gravity.
That's such a powerful image. It implies the default setting of the whole ecosystem, the path of least resistance. It's all geared towards those massive, fast growth ventures.
And the argument is that many smaller projects, even ones with huge potential impact, they don't fail because the idea was bad or the team wasn't ambitious.
They often fail because they just lack access to the right networks, the early money, the visibility, the sort of inherent trust that bigger players can leverage more easily.
Even if these smaller projects have incredible soul, a compelling story, a real spark.
Yeah, all that soul, story, spark, it might not be enough if you can't plug into those established pipelines. It's an incredibly steep climb.
And the contrast with bigger projects is, well, it's stark.
The source suggests they can sometimes fail up, even when they stumble, because they're backed by big names, they have the networks, they have a narrative that people already understand and are ready to support.
So they can raise more money, get more attention, even after setbacks.
Exactly. And this difference really hits home when you talk about pitching. The source highlights this fundamental challenge. Pitching vision versus pitching product.
Especially in a system obsessed with fast ROI.
Right. A product, it's concrete, you can demo it, you can show user metrics, even small ones. Talk about revenue models, market size. It's tangible, fits in a spreadsheet.
But a vision, especially one about, say, cultural impact or systemic change or some new kind of art.
It's just inherently more abstract, isn't it? It requires the listener, the investor, to use their imagination, to invest in potential, in purpose, in long-term resonance, not just immediate quantifiable returns.
Hard to squeeze that into the 90-second ROI window.
Almost impossible. The system, as described, rewards velocity. How fast can you scale? Users, revenue, market share.
But the counterpoint offered is so critical, meaning takes time.
It takes time to cultivate. And building something truly impactful, something future-proof, it requires trust.
Trust from your community, your team.
And crucially, trust from the people providing the resources. And trust isn't built overnight, it's built slowly, through consistency, through presence, through commitment to the purpose, even when the financial numbers aren't skyrocketing yet.
It just highlights this huge misalignment, doesn't it, between the short-term metrics the system loves and the long-term investment in meaning and trust that these visionary projects actually need.
Exactly, a fundamental misalignment.
Okay, so the source doesn't just leave this as theory, it gets really concrete. It shares details about 3 specific projects the author is personally building right now.
Yeah, these are great examples. They really bring those vision projects with soul to life.
They perfectly showcase these kinds of endeavors, full of meaning, full of vision, but, inherently difficult to explain in the usual startup terms.
So the first one is called Journey to the West, and it's framed as much more than just like a concert.
Right, it's explicitly called a cultural bridge.
The idea is to bring together artists from all across East Asia, Vietnam, Korea, China, Thailand, Japan, put them on one stage.
But the goal isn't just a performance, is it?
No, it's about weaving a single story, creating a sound that genuinely connects East and West. And the vision is for it to be streamed, staged in different places, shared globally.
So if we look at this through our deep dive lens, what does this project teach us?
Well, it shows scale, but not scale through user numbers. Scale through connection, cultural connection, bridging geographies, artistic traditions.
And the leadership is focused on resonance, shared stories.
Exactly. It's a classic vision project because its main value is cultural, symbolic, narrative-driven. I mean, how do you quantify building a bridge between cultures on a pitch deck slide?
You can't really, can you? The impact is deep, but not easily measured in dollars right away.
Which makes the funding challenge obvious. Okay, so the second project, RES Energy.
This one sounds quite different. More grounded in, infrastructure, urban development.
Yeah, the source says it's about putting 2 distinct energy systems into one pilot city.
Okay, and what's the big ambition behind that?
The goal is to create a real, live model of what a future-ready city could actually look like. The source stresses the aim for it to be symbolic.
Symbolic, meaning a blueprint, something others can copy.
Exactly, an inspiration that other cities can look at and maybe replicate, so the vision goes way beyond just that one city.
Right, so this project teaches us about scale through replicability.
Yeah, building a strong working model in one place so it can be adopted elsewhere, and connection through integrating complex systems.
And the leadership is about systemic change, beyond just, say, energy efficiency.
Yeah, transforming urban life more broadly. It's a vision project because the impact is long-term, it's systemic. And that symbolic power, that replicability is key. Again, hard to capture that value in short-term financial forecasts.
These projects definitely operate on different timelines and metrics. Okay, the third one. Thunder Dragon Games.
A gaming studio. But again, the source makes it clear there's a specific philosophy here. It's not just about entertainment.
Right. The goal isn't just making games for escape. It says the focus is on making games to express.
Yes. It's about consciously blending art and interactivity, exploring how games can be a medium for deeper meaning.
The ambition is to show games can be storytelling, identity, culture.
Pretty much. Proving they can be more than just diversion.
So how does building a gaming studio like that fit into these founding challenges?
Well, it's a perfect example of leadership trying to inject real meaning, real cultural depth into a commercial space that's often just driven by engagement stats and monetization.
Where the value is in the art, the narrative, the cultural resonance.
Things that are incredibly hard to quantify for that quick ROI pitch, especially in a gaming industry obsessed with, average revenue per user or daily active users. How do you value identity or cultural expression in those terms?
So looking at all 3, the concert, the energy system, the game studio, what's the common thread? What's the big takeaway?
The source pulls it together really powerfully. It comes back to that core challenge. No pitch deck can carry their full weight.
Their true value, their potential.
Yeah.
It just doesn't fit the standard format.
Right. But what they do have, the source says, is soul. Loads of it.
And the punchline is, having soul today.
Is the hardest thing to pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a poignant observation, isn't it?
It really is. It perfectly captures that tension. We were talking about the system wanting velocity and measurable product stuff, while these projects are about depth, meaning long-term vision.
It sums up the dilemma for founders driven by that strong sense of purpose, whose vision goes beyond just the immediate market gap. They're trying to communicate something essential about connection, change, expression that the current evaluation tools just aren't built for.
Okay, let's zoom back out again. Let's think about the international versus national landscape. The source draws some pretty clear lines here, comparing different founding cultures.
It does. It paints a really stark contrast. The U.S. approach is characterized as, what was it? Go fast, be loud, grab capital.
Sounds about right. Very action-oriented, maybe a bit aggressive, focused on speed and big money.
And then it contrasts that sharply with the German approach, using that phrase again, that slightly weary phrase.
Apply, wait, justify again.
Yeah. And it suggests this isn't just about bureaucracy. It's about a deeper difference in mindset, in process, maybe a different attitude towards risk, speed, formal approvals.
And those VC stats we mentioned earlier really back this up, don't they?
Totally. U.S. pulling in, 57% of global venture capital, Europe just 16%, and Germany behind the U.K. and France within Europe. These numbers aren't abstract. They shape the reality on the ground for founders.
So the source connects these stats directly to the implications for founders in Germany.
Yeah, it suggests there can be a perceived lack of space. Space for unconventional ideas, maybe a lack of inherent trust in founders to just get on with it without constant oversight.
And, critically, a lack of patience.
Patience for projects that just need time. Time to develop, time to build trust, time to find their real market or their cultural impact.
It implies the whole structure acts like a filter, a very specific kind of filter.
Right. If your vision doesn't come with those neat quarterly growth projections right from the start, you risk being told you're not ready.
Not ready for investment, not ready for support. The standard metrics become the gatekeepers.
If you can't map out that rapid, measurable growth on a short timeline, even if the long-term impact could be huge, the door often stays shut.
But then the source flips this. It offers this really provocative counterthought.
Yeah, it asks, what if not being ready in that conventional way? What if that's exactly where the real disruptive vision actually lives?
It challenges the whole paradigm, doesn't it?
Completely. It suggests that true innovation, the kind that creates new categories, shifts culture, tackles complex problems, it might not look like a neat scale up in the beginning. It might need a different way of being evaluated, a different kind of patience, a deeper trust in the founder's gut feeling, their long-term conviction.
Which brings us naturally to thinking about the founder themselves, who is the modern founder in this landscape. The source really moves beyond those old cliches.
Yeah, forget the lone tech bro, forget just being a problem solver. The modern founder, operating now and heading into the future, they need to be much more multifaceted.
Not just identifying a pain point and building a fix, but also, what? A storyteller.
A storyteller, definitely. Someone who can craft and share a narrative that really resonates, that connects emotionally. A translator, too.
Translator. Between what?
Between disciplines, between cultures, between different ways of thinking, able to bridge those gaps. Also, a culture maker.
Shaping the values and community around the project.
Exactly. Actively building the identity, the ethos, and ultimately maybe even a system shifter, aiming for an impact that goes beyond just their own company or product.
Wow. So the required skill set has really broadened. It's not just tech skills or business smarts anymore.
No, it feels much more about human intelligence, cultural intelligence. The source lists some key traits. First, narrative intelligence. Can people feel your idea, not just get it intellectually?
Right, that emotional connection. Getting to the why.
Then cultural depth. Do you actually live what you represent? Is it authentic? Are your project's values part of who you are?
Walk in the talk. Integrity.
Then mental strength. This feels crucial. Can you burn bright without burning out?
Ah, founder fatigue. The myth of hustle.
Exactly. The source implicitly tackles that. It highlights the need for resilience, for self-awareness, for finding ways to stay healthy and functional through the sheer pressure and the setbacks. It's about sustainability for the founder themselves.
Because the romantic image of sleeping under the desk,
Yeah.
it's not a recipe for long-term, deep value creation.
Not at all. Fourth trait, interdisciplinarity. Can you connect dots others don't see? Synthesize knowledge from different fields.
Like those projects we discussed, the music, the energy system. They require pulling different threads together. breaking down silos.
Precisely. And finally, responsibility. Are you building for something bigger than just yourself? That sense of purpose, impact, contributing positively, not just aiming for an exit.
So the picture that emerges is, well, it's demanding, empathetic, culturally aware, resilient, agile, purpose-driven, but also potentially much more rewarding.
It feels like a shift towards a more whole, more human definition of what founding success really looks like.
Okay, looking ahead now. The source offers a glimpse into the near future, say 2025 to 2030. What might founding look like then? What will it demand?
It suggests founding will become more hybrid, blending human and digital stuff seamlessly, not just pure tech, but integrating with the real world, with human experience.
Okay, hybrid. What else?
It needs to be deep, seeking, and I love this phrase, minimum viable soul.
Minimum viable soul. That's a direct counter to minimum viable product, isn't it?
It really is. It means baking in the purpose, the ethics, the cultural relevance right from the start, not adding it later as an afterthought. The soul has to be foundational.
Got it. Hybrid deep.
More collective, moving away from the lone genius myth towards building ecosystems, collaboration, recognizing shared effort. Less ego, more ecosystem.
Makes sense.
And more explicitly purpose-led. Founders prioritizing impact before focusing only on the exit strategy.
So are there specific areas where this kind of founding might really thrive?
The source points to a few. Things like ethical AI, developing AI responsibly, circular city systems, building regenerative urban environments, immersive education, creating more engaging learning, cultural tech, using tech for cultural expression, and human-centered design, really prioritizing human needs.
Those all fit that pattern, don't they? Deeper meaning, broader impact, human flourishing.
Exactly. And to actually succeed in this future landscape, the source says the mindset needed is crucial. First, the courage to build without clarity.
Meaning, being willing to start, even if you don't have all the answer.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Taking those first steps, committing to the vision, even when the path is foggy and the destination isn't perfectly clear, it requires comfort with uncertainty.
Which is very different from traditional business planning.
Very. It also demands investors who listen, not just measure. Investors willing to understand and value the intangibles, the cultural potential, the systemic impact, the meaning, not just the easy numbers.
A different kind of literacy needed in the investment world.
Definitely. And finally, maybe most critically, it needs founders who care without collapsing.
Back to that mental strength, that sustainability.
Exactly. The passion, the care, they're vital. But they have to be managed sustainably so the founder doesn't burn out, so they can actually persevere.
So founding in the next few years,
Yeah.
it sounds less about being the fastest or loudest, more about being intentional, resilient, connected, committed to purpose.
Yeah, a more conscious, integrated, and fundamentally human way of bringing new things into the world.
Which really brings us full circle, doesn't it? Back to that core question, pulsing underneath everything in the source. Why? Why keep building? Especially when the odds seem stacked against projects focused on vision and soul in a system that often values other things.
It comes back to that fundamental drive, that belief we talked about right at the start. The source puts it so simply but powerfully. Because I believe in what can be.
Just that faith, that unwavering belief in potential and the possibility of creating something better, that's what keeps founders going.
And interestingly, the source suggests that the struggle itself, the friction against the system, actually clarifies the key learning.
Which is?
The realization that value, it isn't always obvious right away. It's not always recognized immediately by the current system. It takes time for the world to catch up, especially with something genuinely new.
And if you wait for the world to fully understand, for the system to be perfectly ready for your idea,
You'll probably never start. You'll stay stuck, waiting for permission that might never come.
the source offers this beautiful reframing of the whole founder journey. It says it's not a hero's journey anymore.
Right, not the lone, invincible figure conquering everything.
Instead, it's a human one.
Yeah, marked by vulnerability, by learning from mistakes, by needing connection, by the messy, imperfect reality of actually creating something. It's the real experience, not some polished myth.
And the source suggests maybe what we need right now isn't more heroes.
But maybe more heart, more empathy, more focus on the human side, on building trust, connection, both inside the venture and with the wider world.
And it finishes with this really powerful, direct message. A kind of solidarity aimed at other founders out there.
Especially those building quietly, maybe off the main stage, driven by that vision, that soul.
I see you. Let's keep going.
It's simple, but it resonates, doesn't it? Recognizing the struggle, affirming the value of what they're doing, shared purpose.
Yeah, it really does. And it leaves us with this final thought pulled straight from the source's ending lines, something to really reflect on. Founding isn't about being ready.
It's about being willing.
Willing to begin.
Hmm.
Willing to face the difficulties. Willing to build from meaning, even when it feels like swimming upstream.
It's a call to action, isn't it? Rooted not in having everything figured out, but in courage, conviction, and just that powerful choice to bring something you believe in into existence.
And that perspective. Wow, it feels incredibly important for anyone feeling that pull, that urge to build something new, something meaningful right now in this complex moment.
Absolutely.
This has been a deep dive into the modern founding vision, really exploring that crucial space between the idea and the reality, using the insights from the source material we looked at today. Thank you so much for joining us.